The smell of fresh coffee and bacon hung in the air of a small-town diner, where Sunday mornings usually meant laughter and easy conversation. But this morning, all of that vanished the second two police officers walked in, their eyes locked on a single man sitting quietly in the corner. Booth, a black veteran in his late 50s, wearing a worn cap embroidered with faded military insignia. They didn't see his service. They didn't see his sacrifice. To them, he was just another problem. And within minutes, the entire diner would fall silent because of one phone call that changed everything. Marcus Hale had served his country for over 2 decades. Army Ranger, multiple deployments, medals that spoke of courage, resilience, and sacrifice. Yet outside the uniform, none of that seemed to matter. Back home in a small Midwestern town, Marcus was just another black man trying to live his life. He lived simply, preferring quiet mornings at the local diner, a place that smelled of old coffee, pots and frying pans, where the same waitress always greeted him with a nod. For Marcus, it was a small escape, a place where he could read the newspaper in peace and reflect on the day. But beneath the calm surface of that town simmered a different reality. The local police force was notorious for profiling black residents. Tickets handed out without cause, harassment disguised as routine checks, the kind of systemic prejudice that left people exhausted but voiceless. On this morning, Marcus had come in for his usual scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. When the bell above the diner door jingled and 2 officers walked in, Marcus barely looked up, but they saw him immediately. Their steps slowed, their eyes narrowed. Whispers spread among the other patrons. It started small, a question too sharp, a tone dripping with authority. Then another. Soon all eyes were on Marcus. And yet, while the officers thought they were in control, they had no idea who Marcus really was, or what a single phone call could do to everything they thought they knew. The officers approached his booth with the kind of swagger that comes from years of unchecked authority. One stood tall, hand resting on his holster, while the other leaned closer, scanning Marcus like a suspect already convicted in his mind. "ID," one barked, though Marcus had said nothing. Marcus didn't argue. He pulled his wallet slowly, calmly. The room grew heavier as he handed it over. Some patrons shifted uncomfortably. Others pretended not to notice. But the truth was written across every face. They'd seen this before. The officer glanced at the ID, then scoffed. "Doesn't look like you belong here," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Marcus kept his composure. Years of military service had taught him discipline under fire. And this, though humiliating, was nothing compared to real combat. Still, the sting of being reduced to out of place in his own town was a wound deeper than any battlefield injury. The second officer began questioning him. Where was he going? Why was he here? Did he have warrants? The insinuations piled up. Marcus answered politely, firmly, refusing to let anger betray him. But the diner was now silent. Forks hovered above plates. The waitress clutched her notepad, eyes darting between Marcus and the cops. One patron, an elderly man at the counter, muttered, "Leave him alone." But the officers ignored him. The humiliation reached its peak when one officer ordered Marcus to stand up and place his hands on the table. His breakfast sat untouched, cooling in front of him. A veteran who had fought for freedom was now being treated as though he had none. Marcus exhaled slowly. He reached for his phone. The officers smirked, certain he was trying to call for backup he didn't have. But Marcus wasn't dialing a lawyer. He wasn't calling a friend. He was calling someone the officers never expected. Someone who carried far more authority than their badges could ever provide. The phone rang once, twice. A voice answered. Marcus spoke quietly, calmly, explaining what was happening. The officers tried to snatch the phone, but Marcus held it firmly, his eyes never leaving theirs. Within minutes, everything changed. The diner door flew open again, but this time it wasn't just another customer. It was the chief of police. Behind him trailed a senior federal officer in a dark suit, his presence commanding immediate respect. The 2 officers who had been so bold just moments earlier froze where they stood. The chief's face was pale, his jaw tight. He didn't look at Marcus right away. Instead, he turned on his own men with fury. "What in the world do you think you're doing?" the chief demanded. The younger officer stammered, trying to explain that Marcus fit the description, but the federal officer cut him off coldly. "Do you even know who this man is?" he asked. Silence. The chief turned to Marcus, his tone shifting to one of forced respect. "Colonel Hale," he said quietly. "Sir." The entire diner gasped. Whispers rippled through the room. Colonel, veteran. Not just a man in a booth, but someone who had given decades of his life to the service of a country that now humiliated him in its own backyard. The officers' bravado drained instantly. Their posture shifted from dominance to fear. They had targeted the wrong man, and worse, They had done it in public, where every single person in that diner was a witness. The federal officer leaned in, his words sharp as steel. "You're done, both of you." Effective immediately. In an instant, the power dynamic flipped. The men who thought they had control were now stripped of it, standing small and broken in the same diner they once dominated. And Marcus? He simply sat back down, picked up his fork, and finally took a bite of his eggs, quietly reclaiming the dignity they had tried to take from him. News of the incident spread quickly, first through whispers in town, then across local media. Headlines didn't just report on the officers who lost their jobs. They highlighted the deeper truth. A decorated black veteran had been profiled, humiliated, and nearly criminalized for nothing more than his presence in a diner. For many, the story was a wake-up call. It wasn't about Marcus alone. It was about every black man and woman who lived with the constant threat of being reduced to suspicious, simply for existing. Marcus's quiet phone call had not only turned the tables that day, but exposed a system that allowed such abuse to thrive. In the weeks that followed, community meetings filled with heated discussions. Some wanted change, others resisted, but no one could ignore what had happened. The image of two officers standing frozen while their own chief reprimanded them in front of witnesses became a symbol, proof that accountability was possible, even in the smallest corners of America. As for Marcus, he didn't seek fame or headlines. He returned to his quiet routines, back to the diner, back to his coffee and newspaper. But people looked at him differently now. Some approached to thank him. Others offered apologies that weren't theirs to give. Marcus accepted none of it. What mattered to him wasn't recognition, but the reminder that dignity must never be surrendered, no matter how deeply others try to strip it away. And for those who watched, who read, who heard the story, one question lingered long after the news cycle ended. If a man who had risked his life for freedom could be treated like a criminal in his own hometown, what did that say about the freedoms of those with no rank, no medals, no uniform to shield them? The answer was uncomfortable, but necessary, because racism doesn't just wound individuals, it wounds nations. And healing begins only when silence ends.